Hello.
Okay.
Hi. You almost tried to take my hello again. Unacceptable. Stop that, please, now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Scary Talk, episode 78. We are 2 episodes away from episode 80, which is, in turn, 20 episodes away from episode 100, which is the episode when Sunny and I are going to... Shocking.
We'll release our OnlyFans.
Oh my god, we'll leak our own nudes. That's what's happening in episode 100. Sunny and I leak our own nudes. Yeah.
We
Chris Evans
blackmail each
style.
other into leaking each other's nudes.
No, but hi everyone. Welcome to this episode. We got some spooks for you today. But before that, Sunny, how are you doing? Very important. I need to hear it.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm feeling like a little bit brain fogged up because I'm pretty tired. Yeah, prolonged.
That's the kind of energy we need on a podcast, honestly. I mean, if anything, it kind of counterbalances mine, which is good. So just, yeah, keep it mellow, I guess.
Andre's like, I'm so sharp 24/7. It's good that we have someone a little bit more dull to be around to balance me out. Yeah, no. I'm good though. I'm feeling good. My job is going well. I'm enjoying it. And yeah, how about you, Andre?
Well, let me tell you, after researching for this episode, I am low-key depressed. This is, yeah, it's very shitty stuff. Like,
It really is.
Hi all, we're talking Project MK Ultra today, and
Maybe
for
this
those
should
of you
just
that
become
haven't,
like a conspiracy theory slash. I mean, MK Ultra isn't even a conspiracy theory, so I don't know. Maybe this should just become like
Yeah.
an informative, semi-spooky but very real things talk.
excuse me, what do you think we are? Hello. That's every episode, including the vampire and Bigfoot one. So you can go ahead and shut that mouth. No, we're talking MK Ultra today, and for those of you that don't know, it's some real sad shit. Just because of how it's been handled. I think I'm gonna get into that once I explore the background of this with you guys. But yeah, just a very sad, depressing rabbit hole. After this episode, if any of you are interested in going down that hole, there's plenty of information available online. There are CIA documents that you can, like, just literally the actual documents scanned into PDFs that you can find online and read about this. And yeah, so that's how I'm doing. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I have no other important updates. We know that the only other important thing that is happening in the world is Free Britney, and I have no updates on that. So I think I might as well just get into some background for you guys. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Let's see. So I'm gonna try to keep it simple so it's easy to understand. In the 50s, the U.S. government was really scared of communism. We already know that, the Red Scare. And at the time, the newly created CIA, because it's not that old of a branch of an organization, at that time, it was tasked with making sure that the country stayed good and capitalist, basically, right? So while also researching ways to like destroy communism overseas. And what ends up happening is there was a lot of research put into mind control, brainwashing, basically, to try and understand a few things. Among that was like the possibility that someone could be turned. This is really interesting when I read about this. The possibility that someone could be turned into a double agent without themselves knowing it, which is kind of insane. I feel like I've seen that movie. Isn't that Salt with Angelina Jolie? Maybe not. But this idea was researched a lot as a way to do two things, right? To identify potential communists operating here in the U.S., potentially without even them knowing themselves that they were a double spy, and also as a possible method to infiltrate the Soviet Union with our own spies, right? Take a kid in the Soviet Union and train them, but somehow like inject this mind control into them so they have no idea that they're actually working for the US. Like, it's kind of insane. So they were like,
totally. Or making some
this
kind
is
of truth serum, Snape style.
yeah. Oh, that was also something that was researched with MK Ultra. So basically, okay, so just to be super clear, like Sunny said, MK Ultra isn't a conspiracy theory. This is an actual CIA project that took place and is real, and there's documentation backing that. I think that some of the claims that that alleged survivors make about MK Ultra, that's what people gonna get hung up on, and it's like, well, did that really happen? Blah, 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 blah. But the fact that, like, okay, maybe X or Y person is lying about what happened to them, or maybe they're not even a survivor at all. Sure, I guess you could argue that, but the fact that this project existed and it had victims, that is a fact. Whether you believe that the person, sitting in front of you telling you a story is one of those victims, that's a whole other thing. But there were actual humans affected by this, US citizens.
Yeah,
So
and a
just
lot of
want to
them.
make that clear,
Yeah.
that that's not a fringe theory. So anyway.
Yeah, if anything, the CIA was forced to reveal these documents after attempting to burn them all. So,
Oh, are you gonna tell us more about that? Because I didn't know that.
oh, no, yeah. In 1973, originally, it started being investigated. And the president at the time, so I don't know the president in 1973, but I just read about this, ordered basically that everything involving MK Ultra be destroyed because he was like, oh my god, if this is discovered under my watch, I'm gonna get so screwed. Um, and so they
Mm.
tried to do it, but 20,000 documents were left that were discovered because they had been misplaced in a financial document storage area. So essentially, a lot of the documentation that we have would have been destroyed had they been better organized. So you could think about how many like crazy things might be happening that, I mean, that we don't know about. Gosh, no wonder people are
Uh,
into conspiracy theories. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I already do that all the time. Trust me. That's why I have this podcast. Now, that is pretty insane, and also it's kind of like this kind of weird, funny, like Curb Your Enthusiasm music plays in the background because it's like the CIA fucked itself over.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so funny. I'm trying to envision like them finding the 20,000 documents and turning to the person who was supposed to burn them all, and you hear like doo 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 doo
yeah,
doo doo
exactly.
doo.
Precisely. So, oh, thank you for that tidbit of information, by the way.
For
Okay,
sure.
now, so the U.S. is trying to create double agents, basically, and also figure out if there are any here and how they can expose them. So, what do? They create this program. It's called MK Ultra, and they use a lot of questionable techniques as forms of research. Some of this I wrote down, some of this I just memorized. It's like an insane list of shit that they did to people. So the research included dosing unwilling participants with hallucinogenic drugs, so like LSD basically. They would force them into unnatural and dangerous social settings to gauge their reactions. They would subject them to sensory deprivation and isolation. Like they would put them in solitary confinement for long periods of time at a time, and basically a couple of other things that we now all agree are basically torture. So I mean, and the thing is, I don't think that they didn't agree that was torture back then. It's just that who cares? This is an experiment, and we have to do it. We have to get the data that we need, and fuck the participants. They're just guinea pigs. So, basically, what happens is the CIA was new at the time, and it was operating in secret, and like communism was seen as such a huge threat at the time that the government was like, you know what, you guys can do what you want. You guys have like free reign to do whatever you want. We don't really care. What we care is that communism doesn't reach the U.S., which is just so insane to me. That like, I know that humans are very prone to experiencing hindsight bias. So I want to
Mm.
preface what I'm gonna say with that. However, just looking back at the Red Scare and me knowing about it and like talked about it a lot in AP Euro and AP US history, like I get it. It's just kind of insane to me that we were so preoccupied with that shit. Like,
Yeah. Dude, it infected like everything. It's insane.
right. Like, but then I totally understand why we were so preoccupied. Like, the reason I don't understand why we were so preoccupied is because I think to myself, like, well, I don't know, the U.S. didn't really seem like a population very susceptible to the idea of communism. Honestly, even without a Red Scare, just looking at what capitalism had done for the society of this country at the
Well,
time,
I don't
like,
know. That's what we think now, but maybe the CIA just did too good of a job.
I mean, again, hindsight bias. But what I'm
Mm.
saying is, I don't know. I think people, uh, right after World War II ended, were probably, well, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there were probably No, I mean, people in the U.S. were starting to experience the start of an economic boom. It was Europe that was destroyed, and that economic boom was taking place under the capitalist system. So I would be surprised if all of a sudden people were like in the U.S. in, I don't know, 1940, like the late
Yeah,
1940s.
totally.
Actually, ew, capitalism sucks. Ew, like no, capitalism was what was allowing all these suburban families to, like, I don't know, get their two cars and their little nice house and their, like
Totally,
the
totally.
picket white fence. So I don't understand. But then I think about it a different way, and I totally understand why we were so preoccupied with communism. It was because if it were to come here, as unlikely as it wasn't the government being preoccupied about, oh, well, like, how would that change? I don't know, like, the morality of our entire society. It was more
Mm,
how this is going to affect business interests. Because if we, if we turn communist, like, a lot of money at play would see itself damaged. And we
totally.
can't have that.
Always comes
Even if it
down to the
wasn't
money.
exactly. So, like, that's why, again, hindsight bias, I understand. Maybe I'm just stupid. But,
No, no. I
you
mean,
know,
the thing is, too, though, I feel like nowadays we separate. I think it was also the Holocaust. I mean, honestly, I just think
mm.
the idea that people could commit so terrible an act that an entire country could buy into it and think, yeah, this is okay. I mean, I think that is pretty terrifying. Like, you then look at yourself and
But,
say, but well, I mean, okay, that, and I also don't think that we had so much separated communism at the time from, like, at least the younger generation now, I think of things as communism is pretty separate from, dictatorship and violence and everything else. Um, but I don't think that was as present then because I mean, also there's stuff going on with Mao, who obviously, I mean, was totally awful and it killed millions of people.
right.
So
But, like, precisely because of that, wouldn't the U.S. public be like, no, we really don't want this? Or maybe I'm forgetting something. Maybe there was a big push in the U.S. back at the time, post World War II, to inject communism. Like, am I missing something?
you know what though? I don't think it necessarily. I think that the fear of communism infecting us, if that infected like everyone in the U.S., it's not like, well, not everyone, but a lot of people. I don't necessarily think it was because there was a genuine threat of it. I think it was more so just fear for fear's sake, if that makes sense. Fear because you see it and you don't like it, or fear, of military power that they could gain. Um,
Well, I mean, even if I can grant you that and say, well, the fear started with the populace and the government only took advantage of that. It's not the other way around. Even if I can grant that, the government still abused that fear once it was present, right? Like, there was insane propaganda. They were justifying the experiments they were doing with MK Ultra by saying, well, it's for the greater good of avoiding communism. And I'm sure they thought to themselves, is if this ever gets out, like within the 50s, well, we can just be like, oh, it's because would you rather have communism? Like, I think I think that even if it was the people themselves that were scared without any government involvement. Once the government caught wind of that, they were like, okay, how can we take advantage of this?
and I mean, I don't know if it
Um,
was the people first, but I think like what I'm trying to say is that the government being scared of people being sympathetic to communist interests doesn't necessarily have to be because there is a serious threat of people being sympathetic to communist interests. It could just be that they are very scared of that happening. If that
I
makes sense. Like
mean,
fear doesn't have to be reasonable. I think especially during that time period, if that makes sense.
government officials are just people like you and I, after all. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Now, as far as what you said about, well, it would make sense for people to be afraid of that because look at what had just happened in Germany. Well, I mean, am I wrong? But isn't nationalism, like, very, very, very much right wing, whereas communism is the other polarity? Like,
No, no, I would agree, but I think that I think it was probably easy to associate the two.
why?
I don't. I mean, I don't know why. I just think that boomers are really likely to associate the two. They're
I'm
likely
just
to
trying to
tell you
explore
that
that
like.
thought. Is it because, like you said, some people associated communism with dictatorship, and then associated dictatorship with what was happening with Hitler at the time?
I guess so. Yeah. Actually, now I'm curious. I would look something up about it because I mean I don't have any super specific evidence. So maybe they thought communism was a whole separate threat, and that was mostly centered in Russia and China. But I think
I think
more so
so,
than
yeah.
connecting the communism necessarily, I think it was just the idea of, because there's this whole psych theory that came out in the 60s about what makes a good person versus, you know, who is not as morally developed.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it focused on, do you develop your own morals or are you obedient? That's where, you know, that famous experiment comes from that people are told to electrocute someone in another room and they hear the person's screams, which are fake screams, but then they're told to like turn up the electricity, and most people will do it when told to by like the fake psychologist. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's when that type of experiment occurred, which by the way was only done on like, I don't even know, like young white men, and then they were like, the whole world is too obedient. um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's so funny how these like psychologists in Chicago in the 60s really thought that they were speaking for the whole world. Sorry, white male psychologists in the 60s in the US. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so those kinds of experiments were really popular, I think, because of this idea of, it was just this trauma of like, wow, a whole country could sign up and become, what's the word for not coalescent, what's the word for
Complacent?
complacent, complicit, there it is.
Complicit.
Complicit in something so terrible. I mean, yeah, now I do wonder if it's connected or not, but I think that just
I mean,
contributes to the whole scare idea.
I would think it could be connected. That's a very good point. I mean, okay, now just to finish the background that I was giving. So basically,
Mm.
the CIA was new at the time, and the government was very much preoccupied with communism. So they were like, you have free reign to do whatever. And because of that, they ended up not really checking on, well, anything really, especially not the ethics of the experiments they were running. And so, MK Ultra continues, and then it ends sometime in the, if I'm not, did I get this wrong? Late 50s, early 1960s. And then by the early 1970s, the government then finally is like, okay, let's look at almost like, I don't know, like the government, like your mom tells you, like, go clean your room. I'll check in a couple hours. And then they come back and like, what the fuck? So like, finally the government kind of starts checking on what took place there, and they, like you said, they figure out it's pretty terrible. They try to keep things quiet, both to save face and also to keep the progressive liberal movement from knowing basically just how far the government was willing to go in the name of national security, because the progressive liberals certainly wouldn't have not liked that. And the progressive liberal movement, mind you, was a very big deal at the time to keep happy, because that was a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, especially with the rise of hippie culture. So, and protests were happening already at the time in the 70s with Vietnam. So basically, the government was trying to avoid more social unrest. And they were like, we can't let people find out. And I guess, like you said, they actually try to burn this shit.
Mm.
So, yeah. Now, something interesting, because I mentioned hippies. It's very worth noting that while MK Ultra didn't really uncover the secrets of mind control, as far as we know, it did help usher in the hippie movement in the 60s and early 70s. Some of the test subjects found experimenting with LSD. They described it as a very moving experience, and they, I guess, then went out to their communities and began promoting it outside of the MK Ultra experiment.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then there you go. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny.
It's very funny. I have I don't know, I have one person who's part of that group, but um
Apparently, at some point, John Lennon is quoted as saying, "They brought out LSD to control people, and what they did was give us freedom." I mean, yes, I guess. If you're a hippie and not part of the CIA experiments and you're just doing LSD on your own, I'm sure maybe that feels great, but probably wasn't great for the people that were being microdosed for a decade
I always find that
without their
so funny
consent.
that people who do these like intense psychedelic. Well, I mean, I say I don't know if I should be saying that. I've never done psychedelics. I don't know which is
Love
true.
that.
But it's so funny.
No,
People who
you got to give a third one to play like which one of these things is there. Also, my uncle's been in prison. Like,
yeah. What's my third one? Also, I haven't showered in 3 days. But it's just so funny. Whenever I talk to a person who's done like intense psychedelics these days, and it's not whenever actually, but a lot of the time you'll meet that person who's like, you have to do it, it's gonna open up your understanding of like the universe and stuff and da da da, and they're telling you this from like the back of their like beat up truck because they just like
Yeah.
because they just got home from attending their one community college class for the week, and like I'm sorry, this is such an
Right.
intense roast, but it's just so funny. It's all these people who like claim that they've accessed the secrets of the universe, and then I'm talking to them and I'm like, sorry dude, I'm not really getting secrets of the universe vibes from you right now.
I think what it is like, I mean, listen, them looking like hippie bohemians doesn't discount the fact that maybe they did find some deep-seated universal knowledge. However, it just like, well, let's grant them that and say that they did find that, okay, through LSD. Okay, fine. But okay. So how are you going to put that to use? Because I encountered this phenomenon last night, right? Like I almost felt like I was doing LSD from what I was reading. It's unrelated to this topic, but I was reading a CIA document about the potential of a holographic universe and how astral projection works according to them, because at the time they were investigating this in the 70s, they thought it could be real. It's like an insane paper to read. And I was like, okay, Andre, assume all of this is real. What the fuck do you even do with that information? And I think that's how people who do LSD feel. Even if you grant them that all that they just learned is true, okay, is it really applicable information to everyday life? I don't think so. So that's
Fair.
not going to help them with their community college classes.
Not to roast people doing community college. That shit is good. Community colleges are like one of the only things that gives me hope in modern day America. But you know, it gives you an image.
Right. No, I mean, no, I mean, I think it's mostly the car. Because listen, Queen, I did community college. It was great, great little jumping step. It's more the fact of like what you said. It's like, okay, so what? What are you gonna do with that information? Like,
Yeah, no,
hi.
exactly. It's just, yeah, I think it's the sense that they are like, look at me, I am so wise now and like have achieved this new level of humanity that others who have not done mescaline in the back of my beat up truck do not have. And yet there they be, just existing the same as anyone else. Or like believing in chakras or whatever it is. You know, not to isolate. Oh God.
But
Okay, maybe I'll just.
I mean, what? It's fine. Stop. You've given enough disclaimers. Now, listen. I think that, but here's the thing, right? Like, what if they did acquire all this knowledge, and like I said, let's
Yeah,
grant
and it's just
them
not
the assumption that
practical
all of it
enough.
is true.
I mean, that's fair. That is fair.
Right. But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's useless, because like if all they acquired is true, and it is stuff about, I don't know, like chakras and deeper meditation techniques and how to engage in astral projection, that still isn't going to help you in very practical, pragmatic matters. But I mean, it could make you a more spiritual, connected person to your fellow humans, and that is definitely a benefit. That's a good thing.
That's
So I
true.
mean, do I think? Here's the thing. Here's the caveat, though. Do I think that you need to do hallucinogenics to reach that stage? No. I think that if hallucinogenics work the way that people promoting them say they work, then okay, sure, maybe it allows you to reach that stage of connectivity faster, but I just rather not risk it and do what like all the fucking Tibetan monks tell me to do, which is like, no, you just need to like meditate deeply, do like transcendental meditation and shit like this, and like you don't need the drug. And so I'd rather do that if I really want to get to that point. You know what I mean? If I'm that kind of person.
Totally, totally.
Anyway, we're off topic.
Oh, well, okay. But in terms of the
Go
person
ahead.
that you. So, one famous example is Ken Kesey. So, he
Mm-hmm.
was born in 1935, and he had volunteered for some of the experiments that they were doing while he was going to Stanford. So, somehow this is the most classic, like, university student liberal who's like, look at. He's like, oh shit, they're giving out LSD in this super dangerous, awful experiment. Like, get me in on that. And he went on to write One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if you've heard of either the book or the movie, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So he blew up after that. Lived a life as a sort of writer. But yeah, he was big in promoting LSD and a big part of the initial parts of the hippie movement. I also think that this is just a very real testament to, honestly, to like privilege. You have people in because because I mean, we'll mention this later, but a lot of the victims here of these experiments were people who maybe were prostitutes or drug addicts. There's one case of like heroin addicts being offered more heroin if they're willing to do LSD. Just like crazy, awful stuff where they're really taken advantage of and like really hurt afterwards. Meanwhile, you have this guy from Stanford strolling through saying like, "Yeah, let me try it here and there. This will be fun." And you know, he turns out fine and like good for him. But I just feel like it's like this kind of metaphor, I feel like, for how so many things in this so many traumatic things that are happening in the US right now, and people will be like, "Hey, but look at Ken Kesey, he turned out fine. Was it really that traumatic?" And it's like, Ken Kesey was a volunteer who was going to Stanford. He was not exactly I don't know. It's just a very interesting and
Right.
different case.
I mean, and speaking about LSD, I guess a little further, since we're already on this tangent, I will say this: I think it's pretty undeniable that LSD makes you more creative. However, I think for people who are interested in doing it, because I also don't want to. I mean, I'm definitely not promoting drugs on this podcast. However, I think people are gonna do what they're gonna do anyway, and I think the thing to think about something like hallucinogenic drugs is the fact that, for example, it's undeniable that LSD makes you more creative. However, it's kind of a risk analysis, right? Because from what I understand about LSD, like, yeah, it has that benefit, but it can also trigger like psychosis, depression, aggression, all kinds of shit, like schizophrenia, in people who are prone to those mental health disorders. So I mean, and if you're not, okay, great. But the thing is, for example, I am not sure that I'm not prone, and I'm not gonna risk it, especially not for the benefit of being more creative and potentially open my third eye, if that's even a thing. It just doesn't seem like enough of a reward for me to take that risk. And so I think people should think of it in terms of that. Like, actually research whatever, like negatives there are to the thing, besides the fact that it's illegal. And just, yeah, just make that analysis. And for me, honestly, even if it were legal, I'd be like, I don't think so, bro. Even if it was legal,
Mm.
because of those downsides. Yeah.
No, totally. I mean, it's an interesting drug. I think recently there's been more like research on it from a positive perspective of like how can we use it as therapy and stuff. But I think even that is in, of course, very like guided, controlled environments where you're with like a therapist or something, which sounds pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, flashbacks don't sound very fun. I feel like it's fair to say that the very obvious, which is that you're not obligated to do any drug. Oh my gosh.
um. So that's that's a little segue on LSD.
Well, it's just crazy
um.
how much they used. They really just slapped LSD onto everything. Like the amount of different ways that they used it and different people that they used on. It's very funny. Um,
You mean for MK Ultra?
yeah, and honestly, just in general in the 70s, they did an experiment where they gave dolphins LSD when they were trying to teach.
Didn't
They
know
were trying
that.
to see if they could teach dolphins English. I've read a lot about this for like no reason. I don't know. I've been on like dolphin rabbit holes, um, which totally exist. But yeah, no, I just feel like the 60s and 70s were this period of like, we want to do something experimental, slap some acid, you know. I mean, yeah.
Aren't
Mm?
aren't dolphins like one of the other few animals besides us that like have sex for pleasure and also are capable of rape?
Yeah, I think so. They also
That's pretty
like, I think
insane.
that they have the largest brains other than humans. It's like dolphins and elephants are the big ones. Which, speaking of, they
Man.
also tried giving LSD to an elephant in MK Ultra.
Okay, wait, but like, I feel like we're just like throwing all of this without first really delivering more about the general experiment itself. As far as my background, I will just finish with saying that like MK Ultra was a thing. It fucking sucked. There's a lot of info out on it. What I say was just like background, and that I think shit like this and also the syphilis studies on African Americans make me wonder like, oh well, the government wouldn't test on us, right? But like, I mean, I
Mm.
mean, and also just like, I don't know, I feel like a government that experiments on its people really loses its credibility. But yeah, that's just me.
No, totally. it's so funny because they're like, if communism reaches the US, we'll have a terrible government that like takes advantage of everyone. It's like, so what are we gonna do to prevent? Yeah, it's just so funny. But yes, so in terms of some of the goals, there's just like this list. So there's one document from 1955 that just gives a list of some of the substances that they used and what their intended purpose was, and it's insane. It's totally wild. So number one, they were looking for substances which would promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. So they're basically looking for something they could slip to a big politician they don't like, who would then, make a fool of themselves at a big meeting. Number two,
Wow.
yeah, substances which increase the efficiency of mentation and perception. So essentially, they're looking for, the drug that made Lucy or whatever. Um,
Okay.
um, yeah. Number three, materials which will prevent or counteract the intoxicating effect of alcohol. So I guess make you more immune to alcohol. And then, really funny, number four, materials which will promote the intoxicating effect of alcohol. You'll notice with a lot of these, they'll say, we want a material that does this and this, like, terrible thing to someone. And then the next one, or the one before it, will be, we want a material that prevents someone else from doing this and this terrible thing to someone, in case Russia also tries to do it to us, right? Is like the idea behind it.
Yeah.
So they're like, it's just so funny. So they're like, let's make something that makes alcohol more effective on people. Let's also make something that prevents that.
Yeah.
It's just so funny. The intense paranoia here. Materials which will produce the signs and symptoms of recognized diseases in a reversible way, so that they may be used for malingering. So I had to look up malingering. It means like calling in sick, which is the most, I don't know what kind of nefarious purpose that would be. They're like, yeah, we want to make people temporarily sick so they can call in. Like, call every high school student, dude. They want to get their hands on this stuff. Number six, materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier or otherwise enhance its usefulness. They did a whole bunch of stuff with hypnosis, which is also interesting to me culturally, because I feel like that so fits. Have you know like Twilight Zone and like other weird 50s and 60s movies where it seems like there's some kind of weird hypnosis scene? You know what I mean? I feel like there's a pocket in culture for that where these people, because it's just people in the CIA, were like, what can we do to control people? Well, like, hypnosis, that's a thing, right? Like a thing that we've seen in the movies, and so, like, let's try it. Or maybe the movies came from these kinds of experiments. I don't know, but it's just interesting because hypnosis, I don't think, plays a very big role in, I don't see as many modern day shows that have like a psychedelic scene where someone's being hypnotized. I just don't. It's interesting, but. Number seven is substances which will enhance the ability of individuals to withstand privation, torture, and coercion during interrogation and so-called brainwashing. Again, so they said, we're making all these brainwashing substances, let's give our guys something to make them immune to that from the enemy.
Right.
Number eight, materials and physical methods which will produce amnesia for events preceding and during their use. So I have a whole other section on this. But yeah, they were like, let's see if we can make people forget portions or like entire sections of their life. There was they wanted to, on schizophrenics, like make them use amnesia on them to theoretically try and like cure them. It's like, you can't have a bad childhood if you don't have a childhood. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Number nine, physical methods of producing shock and confusion over extended periods of time and capable of surreptitious use. So again, just, causing shock and confusion in people. One is producing physical disablement, such as paralysis of the legs, acute anemia, etc. They were looking to do that. This is a funny one. Substances which will produce pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown. So they were like, Molly's kind of cool because Molly is like known for producing this big high, and then because you've used like all of your serotonin reserves or whatever, the next day you just feel terrible, like the worst you felt. So they were like, while we're making all these things, let's make better Molly. Gosh, some of these are so specific. One of them is substances which will alter personality structure in such a way that the tendency of the recipient to become dependent upon another person is enhanced. Like, that's so devious. They're literally like, we will make you codependent. Like, on what? What was their purpose there? A material which will cause mental confusion of such a type that the person under its influence will find it difficult to maintain a fabrication under questioning. So, veritaserum, you know, we all know the old novel, which was in fact written by Emma Watson, where Snape gives people serum to tell the truth.
Precisely.
Same deal. Substances which will lower the ambition and general working efficiency of men when administered in undetectable amounts. So they were like, what if we could just sneak drugs to the entire Russian population and lower their productivity and destroy them that way? I feel like that's a very...
Oh my God.
It's so funny. I mean, of course, my comments are just what I think that the purposes of these might be. But of course, we don't have it. Well, I mean, I at least don't have a document specifically listing why. Substances which will promote weakness or distortion of eyesight or hearing faculties, preferably without permanent effects. So depriving people of their senses. Keep in mind, for any of these substances, they had to do experiments to make sure that these were working on people. So, substances which, a knockout pill that can be administered in drinks, food, cigarettes, as an aerosol, etc., which will be safe to use, provide amnesia, and be suitable for use by agent types on an ad hoc basis. So they were like, how do we roofie people? That was their next question, essentially. And
wow.
then, and the last one, a material which can be surreptitiously administered by the above routes, and which in very small amounts will make it impossible for a person to perform physical activity. So they were like, yeah, just completely making someone incapable of physical activity for, I guess, whatever amount of time they were looking for. Yeah, so they had documented all of these purposes. Just so despicable. But yes, in terms of the LSD elephant incident, I just find that so funny. So they scaled it for the elephant's body size as opposed to human size, and they gave him like a bigger LSD dose. And his name was Tusco. Poor Tusco.
Okay.
And so they gave him LSD, and they assumed, he would become maybe more aggressive or something like that. And instead, he started having seizures after 5 minutes, and they were like, oh shit. And they gave him huge doses of this, like, anti-seizure medication, and about an hour after that, he died.
Aww.
They killed Tusco. Yeah, and I mean, theories in terms of why that happened is that they scaled by body weight instead of brain weight. There are some other theories there too. But luckily no one has followed up and tried again to see what it was. Yeah, it's just...
Man.
Yeah.
Old-time science, when you could just fuck up an elephant with acid without all that pesky bioethics, am I right?
Dude, just so nuts. Yeah, and so in terms of some of their experiments as well, they would often try to give LSD to people in normal settings without any warning, and sometimes they would even do the experiments on their own employees. If anything, it was standard for pretty much everyone to have tried it. One really famous victim, I don't want to say famous, I mean just like a renowned, like a big victim. I mean, I guess, yeah, just a famous victim.
A big victim.
I know, God. I'm sorry, my brain really is not operating that well. But no, seriously, just one big victim was named Frank Olson. So he was an army chemist who had never taken LSD before, and his supervisor slipped it into his food or drink, and he was on like a forced trip, didn't even know what was going on, and 9 days later he died. Now here's the thing.
Wow.
Officially, he died by suicide, by jumping from a 13-story New York City hotel. But actually his family pursued an entire case where they sued the government, and at first the government said, yeah, stuff was kind of bad, here's $750,000. And then the government said, about 20 years later, the family again was like, actually, we're gonna sue you for murder. Like, this was not suicide. After looking at the report and stuff, his head injury is not what you would find from suicide. This was homicide. And they were like, you accepted our settlement before. It's been a really long time. And the judge essentially said, yeah, we're gonna let the United States government off in this one, but we will say that the allegations that the family brings forward are not so unreasonable. So, so did also die by suicide. We don't actually
I
know.
mean,
So
yeah, in this,
because
he
yeah,
suicided himself right after someone pushed him off the balcony and hit him in the head, I guess.
yeah,
But he
yeah.
wasn't dead until he hit the ground, so therefore,
Yeah, and the theory there is that he felt really bad about the experiments that were going on, and of course after being dosed by a supervisor or whatever, he was not feeling good about it. He resigned a few days before his death. So I'm guessing they didn't want a whistleblower, and that is the
wow,
theory behind, or the theory behind that being homicide. So, uh,
dang,
yeah, so Frank Olson, say his name, just yeah. Meanwhile, Ken Kesey's straight up chilling at Stanford. He's like,
right.
he's like, give me some more of that.
Now,
Just
go
so
ahead.
no, that's all. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, no, I mean that's very interesting, but it got me thinking. When you mentioned the dolphin experiment earlier,
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard about this. There's like, oh my god, there's this like thing where like a woman back in the '60s. Her name was Margaret Lovad, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. She was on this project funded by NASA where she like interacted with dolphins, and one of the dolphins, his name was Peter, and he ended up falling in love with her,
Wait, I've read
and
all about
like,
this. Yeah.
yeah, and she would like jerk him off,
Yeah,
and
and she'd be
then she
like,
had to
it's just
leave,
like a
and so he
physical
killed
itch.
himself.
Dude, that blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that made me think of that. It's pretty insane. I mean, in this thing with Margaret and the dolphin Peter, from what I understand, like the lab that was provided, because she was like a young scientist. She wasn't very like prominent or anything. The
Mm.
lab that was providing her with the dolphins to experiment on, I think she was trying to look into like I don't know, not something involved with MK Ultra, just like animal research. The lab that provided her with the dolphins um, did like either was sanctioned by the CIA or NASA or both, and they wanted the lab to experiment with LSD on the dolphins, and she was able to like uh not have them inject any LSD into Peter, but there were other two dolphins who did get the needle, and yeah, so that's interesting. Like she tried to protect her lover. Of course, now she says, "Oh no, no, no! I didn't have feelings for the dolphin. When it died, I was sad, but not so sad because at least it was in a better place." Like she tried to be very nonchalant
It's
about
okay,
it, from what I
girl. It's
remember.
just the shape of water.
Right, but like I'm pretty sure she's probably in love with that dolphin dick at the time, but she just doesn't want to seem like a weirdo now.
I mean, who knows? There's another guy, I forget his name, who like fully admits to to having been in love with this dolphin, and claims to have had like an illicit relationship with her. And yeah, and he wrote this like autobiography about it, and tried to form a whole movement where it's like make bestiality okay. Yeah, well, no, it's really kind of it's definitely kind of fucked up to think about, like a dolphin falling in love with you. Like that's so sad for the dolphin, you know?
Right,
Yeah.
because well, they can't do that. I mean, they could for a while. Apparently, she was living with a dolphin 24 hours a day in a kind of like converted house because ended up bringing the dolphin to her house and then making modifications to her house so the dolphin could live there. So they ended up being together all the time. So you're not gonna tell me she didn't love this dolphin. I think she just realized it was really weird, and so she tried to like kind of pretend like it didn't hurt her when the dolphin had to be taken back, and it ended up suiciding because it was sad.
Mm.
That's pretty insane. Okay, I found an article on this because I this is itching me, no pun intended. To I need to know more. Apparently, Sunny, this is the experiment where they try to teach dolphins
No,
English.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I didn't connect the dots. I mean, it looks like this wasn't her idea, but like she was just doing other research for the lab, and eventually they were like, "Hey, you like dolphins, right? Can you help us with this thing that we were told to do? Like, teach them English." And okay, this is an excerpt from this article. This is insane. This is the Guardian article. Um, while Lovat was encouraged to keep on teaching Peter English, there was something getting in the way of lessons. Dolphins get sexual urges, says a vet that was who looked after the animals. I'm sure Peter had plenty of thoughts along those lines. Peter liked to be with me, explains Lovat. He would rub himself on my knee or my foot or my hand. And at first, I would put him. What does a dolphin dick look like? I'm gonna look that up too.
Oh God. Isn't it supposed to be
Oh my
like?
god!
I'm pretty sure it's like huge and it can like wrap or something. Maybe that's like an urban
I hope
legend.
that,
I don't actually know.
I hope the CIA isn't looking at my browsing. I mean, honestly, is it any weirder than like anyone else's? Dolphin penis. I can't. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's pretty weird looking. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, so it would do that, and she says that at first I would put him downstairs with the girls. She says. But transporting Peter downstairs proved so disruptive to the lessons that, faced with his frequent arousals, it just seemed easier for Lovett to relieve his urges herself manually.
Yep.
Okay, girl. I allowed that, she says. I wasn't uncomfortable with it as long as it wasn't rough. It would just become part of what was going on. Like an itch, just get rid of it.
Exactly.
Scratch it and
Dude,
move
that
on.
quote, iconic.
And that's how it seemed to work out. It wasn't private. People could observe it, according to her. So she then says it wasn't sexual on my part, sensuous, perhaps. It seemed to me that it made the bond closer, not because of the sexual activity, but because of the lack of having to keep breaking. And that's really all it was. I was there to get to know Peter, and that was part of Peter. I mean, either she's lying, or she's one of those like super hippie people that's like, oh, you know, it's all normal shit. Like, I don't know, I'd have a hard time being okay with that and just being like, yeah, that's normal. I'm just, you know, jerking off my dolphin mate. Gonna put that on a sticker and slap it on the back of your car.
It is wild.
Yeah,
but here's the thing, Andre. How do you think Pomskis are made? Pomeranian Husky mixes.
I mean, I'm guessing the Pomeranian fucks the Husky, because if it's the other way around, the Pomeranian would die.
No, exactly. But the thing is, there's no Pomeranian capable of that. So someone's got to go and jerk off the little Pomeranian and take it and inject it into the Husky. That's the process.
Interesting. I mean, but like, how does that relate? I mean, I guess that they jerk the dog off, but like, it's not. I doubt people that are like these breeders, which I don't know, that sounds pretty shitty to me.
For like a job purpose. I don't think it's
right. Like it's not like dog research, and all of a sudden I also love this dog that I'm researching and I want to jerk it off.
True.
Like, no.
I still think it's just that idea of like, is sexual touching? You know what I mean? Like sexual touching. What's the borderline there?
I mean, I think with animals it gets really weird. I think with the dolphin, it's a little clearer because he clearly wanted to do that to her, and dolphins are very intelligent. Not that I'm promoting dolphin sex, whatever. Everyone, shut up. But with the dogs, like the dogs, I guess it is different. The dogs don't want to do this. It's just, you know, they need the dog's semen to do the job and, you know, breed a dog, which is, I don't know. To me, breeding dogs is pretty shitty. But you know, dogs are also less smart, and so it's kind of like more abusive, but also they're so not smart that like, where does consent even factor there? I can't believe we're talking about this. What are you doing?
Like, I think it's a really interesting topic. To be honest, I've thought about this a lot.
I think that if you are, oh my god, jerking off a dog for any other reason besides because you're a breeder, then that's pretty creepy. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
I think we all agree there.
I was gonna say, well, I mean, is there a point you were gonna make with that?
I guess so. I watched a YouTube video and it was this dude, and he was like, here's how you jerk off your dog if you want to, like, do this for breeding. And he just, like, brought out this dog, and it was chilling. And he was like, at first it might be weird. They'll get into it. And then he just... it's a video of him just jerking off this dog. And I don't know. I don't know, like, can that dog give consent? I don't know. It left me with a weird feeling. Not necessarily, like, super strongly to one way or the other, but...
I don't think it can. That's the thing. It can't, but that doesn't mean you should do that. But I guess if you're a breeder, I guess that's your job. And your dog is undeniably, although it sounds uncomfortable, that person's property. And so, am I wrong? Hello, am I wrong? Am I wrong?
I
No,
mean,
I'm not
yeah,
wrong.
I guess you're
Right?
right. We do own our
I'm not wrong.
pets.
So therefore, I mean,
I don't know though. You could make the
yeah.
argument. I mean, that's like like animal abuse isn't okay just because you own them. I think the question is
No, but
just
what I'm
whether it's like,
saying
hmm?
is, I don't think it's abuse because he's. Well, I mean, the dog doesn't know any different. The dog doesn't know the difference between someone who's a breeder and not. So
Mm-mm.
I guess it is kind of weird for the dog, right? I mean, the dog can make the differentiation, even if we humans can, and we're like, oh, it's okay because it's a breeder.
No, exactly.
Um, yeah, you make a good point.
But you
But
just
it couldn't. It could.
kind of
But
made.
it couldn't consent anyway, and it's almost like, I know this sounds very wrong. It couldn't consent anyway, and it's almost like it doesn't matter because if it could, well, no, maybe if it could, it would make it different. Like if dogs could talk, I feel like people wouldn't be comfortable doing that. But like I was gonna say, even if it could, like again, there's the matter of it being property, which I know sounds fucked up, but I don't make the rules. Okay, I'm just telling y'all, and it's true. I'm not lying. So I don't think it would even matter, honestly.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that like the dog being property is relevant. Like if it's abuse and it's not okay.
No, I'm saying, what if dogs could talk and
Hmm.
they were like, I don't want to do that,
Yeah.
and they're because they're still your property. I mean, if that's how we still categorize dogs in that hypothetical universe, then it wouldn't really matter what they think, would it?
No, I think it would. I
So
think it would still be abusive. Like because then you would go to beat your dog, and we don't say, oh well, just because the dog's your property, you
no,
can
but
beat it.
Sunny, we're talking about different
Well, I mean,
things. Like,
what's the
I'm not
difference between
saying it's
sexual
not.
and physical abuse? I think either way, it's kind of like it's hurtful, you know. So it
Yes,
shouldn't be
Sunny, you
allowed.
didn't let me finish. I was
Okay.
gonna say we're talking about different things because I'm not talking about whether or not it's abusive. I don't know that I think it's abusive now. I know that I would definitely think it's abusive if dogs could talk. But what I'm saying is, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to stop that, which is really what I'm talking about, if we still treated dogs as property in this hypothetical universe the way that we do in the current universe.
Why wouldn't we be able to stop that though? Like, couldn't we just say like you're not
Because
allowed to jerk
I
off
mean,
your
I guess we
dog?
could just make a law that says, yeah, but also, like, I mean, was slavery a thing? And then the next day we were like, actually, this is bad. We don't like it. No, right? It took time. So that's kind of what I'm leaning
Well,
at.
I'm saying it shouldn't take time. You know, like if humans were better, slavery wouldn't have been a thing for so long. I mean, that's kind of my whole
Sunny, I'm
point
not
here.
disagreeing with that. I'm just trying to paint a realistic picture here.
Okay, well, I guess my point is more about like what I believe rather than like what I think would happen, I guess.
Well, we exist on different planes. Anyway, that's how we went from MK Ultra to dolphin sex to
I
dog
can't believe
slavery, I
I'm
guess.
actually
So
so glad we went on this tangent together, Andre. This is wild.
before I just want to finish the dolphin thing with this. So this woman, okay, so this shit was happening with the dolphin. They sent the dolphin back because he like it was actually hurting him to like be in that house. It was too small of a place. Not that the dolphin noticed that he was just in love with this woman, right? But the lab was like, no, like he's gonna die if we keep him here. Like it's not comfortable. So we should return him to the zoo or whatever the fuck, the lab. And a couple of weeks later, this woman gets a phone call from one of her coworkers, and this guy tells her that Peter had committed suicide.
Yeah.
Apparently, dolphins are not automatic air
Hmm.
breathers like we are, and so every breath is like a conscious effort. And according to this is a quote from this guy, if life becomes too unbearable, the dolphins just take a breath and they sink to the bottom. They don't take the next breath. And
Yeah.
just apparently this is not like the first time this happens. Like dolphins commit suicide. Like
Yeah.
what?
No, no. You know what? This is also another rabbit hole I've gone down is which animals have committed suicide. And it's really interesting when you read about it because folks will say, you know, in order to commit suicide, you have to have knowledge of the future, like knowledge of yourself in
Mm-hmm.
time, the ability to make a plan, the ability to connect that, like, if you don't live, you don't. Like, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of intelligence required and which is why a lot of people will make claims like no animals can't do that, but yeah, they're recorded. I think that's actually how I got to this whole dolphin love story originally, was like seeing the dolphin suicide story. But
Insane.
yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know of any other creatures that commit suicide. I know of like crabs will like cut off their limbs if they're damaged or something so they can regrow. But I mean, that's
Yeah, all I know
I
is
don't,
that like
yeah.
elephants will go to the grieving places of their their like loved ones that have died like every year or something like that. So
Yeah, they like elephant grief and elephant cry. It's like a thing.
yeah,
Yeah, they're really smart. Which I mean, not gonna go down this rabbit hole, but like animal rights, I feel like hello, hi, and like I mean
welcome to Vegan Talk once
that is
again.
yeah. Welcome to Vegan Talk once again. That doesn't make my point very clear. I think what I was gonna say was there actually is a movement that I read about like years ago, trying to make the more intelligent types of animals classified as non-human persons before the law, so that their treatment is different. And that includes
Whoa,
dolphins, elephants, and a form of some weird chimpanzee. It's like a specific chimpanzee.
bonobos maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know. I love bonobos. I
maybe,
don't think they're the
but
smartest though. Hmm.
from what I remember from like that website, it had a list of the animals they were advocating for this like law to take place,
Wait, that's
and
so
that those were the
cool.
animals included. Yeah, and I think it makes sense. I think it's very unfortunate to have to say that no, all animals are just as smart as other animals,
Yeah,
but that is the truth. And that doesn't mean they deserve, like pain or for us to treat them wrong. Hashtag everyone go vegan. However, it does mean that if this is going to be a process where we have to do it by phases, unfortunately, some animals do have to go first. And I think it makes sense for the more smart ones to go first, the more intelligent ones.
totally. I
It's a
totally
start.
agree. I think that's awesome. Yeah, because yeah, exactly. I think Waterworld's a great example, right? You have dolphins, which are so intelligent, like in enclosures that are way too small, all kinds of other awful conditions that meet some kind of bare minimum, whatever it is. And I think I
Hmm.
don't know. I'm wondering if I'd have to look it up, but I do feel like there have been other cases of dolphin suicide have been like in overly small enclosures at SeaWorld or whatever, you know. Um,
Right.
it's so sad. And also just in general, animals in captivity are like less fertile, less active, they live shorter lives than their counterparts in the wild. Isn't that isn't that interesting? Like we give them everything they
Yep.
need, you know? And you know what I think, honestly?
I
Are
mean, we don't
humans
give them the
so different?
space. Not enough space.
Yeah, true. Space is the pretty simple one. But it's just so interesting to think that like living, I guess, without a purpose or like without space or without I don't know, being able to satisfy whatever you need instinctually, um, will, just bring down your lifespan. I don't know, that's
I
just so sad.
mean,
Mm.
is that really a shocker, especially if you're kind of into new age shit? We all know mental health is important and it can
Yeah.
literally shorten years of your life. It's almost like if you live in a cage, you get sad and then you live less because you have no reason to live.
Whoa.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think these animals have the need to explore, potentially even more than we do. I mean, there's a lot of animals in captivity that are like that by nature. Like a
Yeah.
lot of, I don't
Like if
know,
I were just
critters
trapped
and
in my
shit.
room with Wi-Fi, I don't know.
So there's that. Also, clarification. Earlier, I wasn't directly comparing like slavery to like the dog. What I was saying was like bad shit happens in the world. We don't immediately look at bad shit and be like, "Oh, it's bad. Let's stop it because it's bad now." One, because humans don't just agree on shit like that quickly over time,
Mm.
and two, because there's a lot of external factors that keep us from making decisions like that, like greed and other shit.
Mm.
And I was just saying, like, all of a sudden we're like, let's say, we all love jerking off dogs or whatever, and then tomorrow all dogs can talk. Like, would we still do that? We like to think no. I mean, I wouldn't, but a lot of
Mm.
people would. And what I was saying is, you probably wouldn't be able to stop him for a while because there wouldn't just be a law immediately. That's what I was
Yeah.
saying.
No,
To
I
be
do agree.
realistic.
I could see what your point there is for sure.
Um. So this episode, man, this
What just
episode.
happened?
Let me get us back on track just for a little bit. I want to read this, and this is fully MK Ultra. So back on track.
Okay.
I want to read this account of someone who was a victim of this program. Um, yeah. So let me just read it. Actually, this person is this is a Reddit user, and their username is MRAH man3536, and this is a recent post. His post says, "My story starts before I was born. I've had a lot of people across different subreddits, and this is on the MK Ultra subreddit, which is a thing. I've had a lot of people across different subreddits and accounts ask me to tell my MK Ultra story, so here it is, or at least here is as much of my fragmented mind will allow me to recall of it now a good 20 years later after the bulk of the abuse. So the short version is my story, which is in no way just my story, starts long before I was born. My mother was a flower child, a product of the government-sponsored Laurel Canyon movement, which is something similar to MK Ultra. We're not gonna get into that, but basically CIA was doing shit before MK Ultra, right? And it was in a commune and in a family, quote unquote, much like the one CIA asset Charles Manson ran that this story begins.
What?
So this guy's making pretty big claims. Yeah, and I looked into this, and not to go into that down the rabbit hole, but he's basically saying that Charles Manson was a CIA asset, and that before MK Ultra, there was this thing where the CIA was apparently putting people in communes to, again, some research of some kind, and that one of those communes, the CIA put Charles Manson to lead it, and this was before he was, a murderer. So this guy's basically saying, like, yeah, Charles Manson was bad, but low-key, it's the CIA's fault for fucking with his brain. So I don't know about that, but
Oh, that's really
here's the claim, right?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. So, see, when my mother was 15, she met the man I would later call my father, and together they were beautiful, every bit as beautiful as this fellow MK Ultra survivor, and he like links to a video. Anyway, makes her parents and grandparents out to be in her moving ritual abuse testimonial video. He's basically saying he relates to someone that he found on YouTube telling a similar story, which I've watched countless times while trying to make sense of my own awakening to the dark secrets of my past. See, the sick people who perpetuate all this evil, they covet beauty the way most of the ones they consider so quote-unquote profane covet money. If you're what they consider genetically perfect, and my mother and father certainly were in their youth, you're sometimes allowed in even if you're not one of the 13 families. I know this is confusing. Basically, this guy is going to connect this to MK Ultra in a minute. He's saying he was a victim of MK Ultra, but he's also saying that his parents were a victim of an earlier CIA program, which was the Commune program, where, like I said, the CIA was doing research, whatever, and apparently the people they would pick for this Commune program were people that they deemed genetically perfect because that was part of the research, like some eugenics shit. These are big claims. I haven't seen CIA documents about this experiment, only MK Ultra,
Yeah.
but that's what he's saying.
That's so funny too.
So,
It was like they really said, we don't care what's inside the brain, but if you're beautiful, you're in to our terrible
oh my
abusive
god, who was running
experiment.
this? Tyra Banks? Now listen.
She would though if the CIA proposed it in the right way.
Oh my god, America's Next Brainwash Model. No, that's season 13. Listen, so and apparently, yeah, there was a thing in that Commune experiment called the 13 Families. I'm sure you can imagine what that means. Like there were 13 whatever. I didn't really read too much into that, but and he says, and so it was on this commune that my mother found herself entrapped in a web of sadistic sexual, mental, and emotional abuse, so vile the average person's cognitive dissonance wouldn't allow them to believe most of it anyway. So it therefore doesn't bear any telling when it comes to the gory details. However, if you've seen the movies Hollywood likes to come out with and paint as fiction, like the original Martyrs, Salo, or even the Hostel series, which all those are very gory movies if you guys don't know, you should have some idea of the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Yes, folks, in the sick, sad world we've all been thrust into from a much more comfortable place, he says in parentheses, I've spent some time in the astral planes, there's unfortunately big money in snuff films. So he's not only alleging that the Commune experiment existed and his parents were a part of it, but that the communes within them there was sexual abuse and also abuse that went as far as snuff films, which if you guys don't know, go listen to our dark web episodes. But it's basically a movie where you kill someone for real, and you film that. You film that and then you sell it, or not, I guess. But he says, my mother, in essence, was brainwashed into becoming a sex slave against her knowledge under the infamous MK Ultra program that was supposedly discontinued in 1973. He doesn't believe it really was. Used in the most vile ways possible by everyone from famous musicians to politicians and everyone in between. So he's really giving MK Ultra a lot more allegations than we initially talked about. Mm-hmm. The kind of abuse she lived through is said to be bad enough to leave a sort of genetic imprint that can be passed on through generations. Which, when he said this, I thought this was really interesting because I know that epigenetics is a thing. It's a real
Mm-hmm.
thing, and I don't know if you know anything about it,
Yeah.
but basically, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the really, really short version is the genetic material that we carry it from conception, basically. However, that material can be changed throughout your lifetime, something we previously didn't think was a thing, by events that you experience,
Totally.
especially really traumatic ones, good or bad.
Yep.
But they have to be big enough and traumatic enough that your genes, like the basically proteins that activate gene actions, change, and so
Yeah.
now what that gene expresses has changed, and you may not notice it,
Yeah. It's
but
like,
it will be in your offspring. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
I think there's an example where if one of your grandparents has experienced a great famine, you're more likely to
Hmm.
be overweight because your body.
Isn't that
Yeah.
insane?
Yeah.
Isn't that insane, dude? Are like all the Irish fat? Is that insensitive? Maybe they were like generation right after the potato famine, but like I guess it's been long enough now. But anyway, um, so he says because this had been passed on, he says, and well, I guess my natural ability to disassociate on command because of this passed on trauma made me a viable second generation candidate for the program, which is terrible, right? Like, if anything, because his mother was so fucked up and he was born fucked up, they wanted him more for MK Ultra now, which is like terrible. Like, the abuse doesn't end. Um, and he says, when my mother was no longer viable and aged out of being a sex slave, they simply activated her lion programming and used her as a handler to sell my sister and I up the river to the same people. Only what we lived through ended up being far worse. How I got your interest? Ask me anything. And that's his Reddit post. Um, that's insane. Like, if this is true, he's basically saying, he was put into MK Ultra and his mom was phased out of all this sex slave thing, and basically they activated some kind of like mind programming they had put in her years prior to to be okay with selling her kids to the CIA, basically, so they could continue their experiments. Um, that's insane.
That's some pretty fucked up stuff.
Yeah, dude. Anyway, dolphin dicks, I guess.
And CIA,
Whatever.
don't come for us. We really support you and the government.
Oh.
We're American. Woo.
Listen, CIA, I'm just reading something that's on the open internet that took me like 10 seconds to find, so there's no use coming for me. If anything, come for this, okay? Like, hello.
You really
Or
just threw
check
them under the
yourself.
bus. God.
Yeah, I mean, also, yeah, just saying. So, pretty insane shit, dude, but that's MK Ultra.
That's MK Ultra.
Uh,
And no one was ever seriously punished for anything here. That's the
yeah,
that's the
that's
lovely
the
ending
thing.
there. Yep, everyone kind of sneaked
Like
away. Yep.
like you said, there was some compensation to some people at some points, but no real punishment. I know that right now there's a class action lawsuit that's being put forth by a lot of families of MK Ultra survivors. Like at this point, people putting this together are like the children of parents who were basically discapacitated by the experiments. They're not like like
Yep.
vegetables, basically. Um, yeah, and that's the best they can do now, a class action lawsuit. But I mean, first they have to win it, and when you do that, it's like compensation. Am I wrong?
Mhm.
It's not prison
Yeah,
time.
because the statute of
So,
limitations has gone up.
which is insane to me. Like, why is there statute of limitations on this if it was the government themselves who did it? Like, what? I'm so confused. Can't they just change it for this since like it's their own fucking up that they're trying to fix? Like,
Oh, but if
what?
anything, the government would never do that. It's interesting. I read about a Supreme Court case that was against the government, and it lost like 5-4, a very narrow margin. And anyways, it's very interesting when you think about the system of government that's used to check the government. Or when you read a Supreme Court case that says, blah 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 name versus the United States, like, ooh,
Right.
yeah,
It's pretty insane. So, so everyone just digest all that, and I guess the takeaway from this is, it's I think what I said in the beginning. Like, I mean, okay, sure, the CIA, the government as a whole, which allowed this to happen may not be this way anymore. Like, oh, I hope the government isn't testing on its populace right now, but it certainly did in the 70s, and that wasn't that long ago, and it did so for decades
Yeah.
before that.
Stay
And
updated
it's
on what's on
like,
the stuff that leaks, so that you know what
yeah,
they're up to
like
these days.
the takeaway is we certainly hope none of this stuff is happening anymore, and the people that are in government are better people than the people who were there before. But I mean, take care of yourself. Trust no bitch, I guess, is
Trust
the
no bitch.
takeaway.
That should be the trust no bitch. Yes.
And I mean, yeah, like this is pretty horrific, and I think it's comforting to try to see this through the lens of like, oh, well, this is something that happened in the past, right? But even if nothing like this is happening anymore, which I obviously have my doubts,
Mm-hmm.
this past is like 50 years old. It's really not that old at all.
Yep.
So yeah, everyone just be careful out there. Research stuff, educate yourself about things that
And
happen to
never let
people
your
and
moral
whatnot.
boundaries be compromised. If people are
Yes.
telling you do this experiment on someone, it's okay. The orders are from the higher ups. Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Everyone, the Mothman is real. So is the CIA.
God, I don't know which is
Yeah,
scarier.
man. And don't poop your pants. And yeah, man. God help us all, I guess.
Totally.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
And we'll remember, DM us at Scary Talk on Facebook and at Talk Scary on Twitter and Instagram for anything you want to tell us or episode ideas, etc. You can find us on all podcast listening platforms, and we will talk to you soon. Good night.
Good night.